to have hopes and dreams, and there's a lot in that, and I certainly, when I actually sat with people who were like key workers to the person I was looking after, like one of the great things was actually to sit down and really go through that, especially if it was maybe somebody that doesn't have the communication skills to be able to tell you what it is, but you might have like all this amazing history from somebody, and you're like, well, you can kind of go for everything, but for you, like coming up with that whole thing and like having those hopes and dreams, because obviously there are things out there that are not going to be possible, but you can always try to get something close to it, and it's certainly got people where I was working like thinking in a different kind of way, with the structure of PCP and like getting to that point, because I know that's towards the end, when setting one of these kind of things up, but like the hopes and dreams part, like how did that kind of come from? And like, because I know it sounds bizarre, maybe if somebody's listening and they're thinking, well, everyone has a hope and dream, but it sometimes decisions for people with learning disabilities can be so limited, that something as big as that can be missed sometimes, because there's just not that way of thinking.
Well, first of all, I want to be really clear that I haven't invented person-centred planning at all.
Right, yeah.
The processes that have a strong focus on the future were really developed by John O'Brien,
right,
and his colleagues, so PATH and MAPS, and personal future planning with Beth Mount. And those style of planning doesn't have the idea of hopes and dreams at the end. It's really, really central to the way that those styles, those approaches use. One of the things that I've found powerful is in person-centred reviews, where we ask what matters to people, what's important to them, and what's important to them now, and what's important in the future. And particularly around young people in transition, we found that to be incredibly powerful. And also what we've learned is people don't want extraordinary things, really. They want the kind of same things that you and I do, a job that's fulfilling, enough money to pay the bills, a home that you can call your own, friends and community. And most of those things together we can do something about. And often that requires bringing a circle of support around people. It requires us to think differently about services, to explore things like personal budgets, and to see if there are ways that people can have more power and control over their money and their resources. And you hear lots of stories about people saying, well, what if his dream was to fly to the moon? That's impossible. And I think it's important to get underneath what the message or the intent behind that is, and see if we can explore with a person other ways to achieve that. But helping people be ambitious about their lives, I think is really, really important.
Yes, and that kind of brings me to my next thing, really, because like certainly when I was doing some of the training with people, like some people are very much I guess it's just an older mindset of like wrapping people up in cotton wool sometimes, like, and I'm trying to when I was trying to do it, I was trying to think like, look, life is, there's risk in everything, and you can either choose to kind of do things, there might be things where good planning you can still do these things, like it's not impossible, but like the actual risk taking part, that's something that's really changed. I would say in the last 5 years people are a little bit more okay, we can go out to, I don't know, like a nightclub, we can pull this off with somebody who might have had challenging behaviours when they go out, but with good planning, if it's something they've really wanted to do, and it's something as small as that, because I remember working with somebody and he was so he had traits of autism, but he was very much, he'd sort of been in the system for so long that he was very sort of institutionalized, I guess, in a way. Like everything had to end at 10 o'clock at night. And the only reason that was is because people would end their shift. So anything that happens after 10, it's like, no. And so going to a nightclub for this particular person was like quite a big deal. But obviously, you're not just going to want to turn up at a nightclub at like 10 and then, oh, right, we've got to go now because our shift changes, type of thing. And it was making people look at things and like especially with action planning and using that as a tool, really, really effective for the people we work with. But you were saying like you face some challenges on people like having that power, but have you faced things like with stuff around risk taking with certain individuals, like when it's come to that, whether it's been in residential or in the community? Have you faced any issues with that type of approach?
Yes, I remember John O'Brien many years ago saying that actually the biggest limitation to people living great lives is not just resources, it's our attitude towards risk. And I think that's absolutely right, and even more so today. And I was at TEDx Manchester yesterday, and several things went wrong with the technology, and one of the speakers said we'd spent some time thinking what could possibly go wrong today, and these weren't some of them. And I think that's what risk is. It's just having a sensible approach to saying, you know, what would be the risk to us doing this, and which are the risks to the person, and which are the risks to us, and what can we do to make those more likely, and not using that as a reason to stop doing things. But the question about risk that we don't usually ask is, what are the risks of us not doing this? If we don't do this, what are we risking? And often that's what we're risking is the person not having much control over their lives, or not doing something that really matters to them, like going to a nightclub, or not not being able to develop new hobbies and interests. So I think when we consider risk, it's both what might go wrong, but also what are we risking by not trying this, and thinking about that differently.
Sure. And like going back to what you said really important earlier about when you said like, especially when you weigh up like the important for and important to, and obviously people, whenever I always use that as an exercise in my training. I'm like, okay, tell me what you think the person you've known for like, I don't know, 5 years or whatever you've been supporting. And often it's always things like to them is like, they'll say it's their medication, you know, the type that what's going on their planner, you know, having a shower. And when you start to break down things, really, does that really matter to them? Or is it something as simple as having like 2 biscuits before they go to bed is actually more of a bigger thing to them than, you know, worrying about their medication time? And when you break it down, you start to realize that the 4 and the 2 are very, very different from one another, and that, you know, you get that different, I guess, perception of somebody that you're kind of looking after or taking care of and whatnot. And sometimes it's the little things that matter the most, and sometimes like we're always kind of, well, I think because of the way we are as carers and people just in general, when we go into that environment, we're always like keen to think about the things that like are important for us to do for the person. We think instantly that there's like a kind of giving back type thing, when it's kind of not. It's like the little things matter the most, and it's often the things that you don't think about all the time, just because it's hard to wear that hat, I guess, all the time. But and you saying about like the whole risk taking part of it as well, it's like I always say to people, like, a few of the problems we had to begin with doing action plans is that a lot of people were sticking to the more comfortable things. And I said, like, well, you know, as an example, somebody wanted to maybe go to do trampolining, and I was like, no, you know, he would never like it, or you know, he spoke about doing it, he likes watching it, but if we took him there, there'd be a problem, and you know, it not going right. But I kind of said, look, the idea here is that whether it goes right or wrong when you're there, it's about giving the opportunity to try it. And that's kind of like a key thing, I think, with like with using person-centered planning in this way, is like giving that opportunity to begin with. Yeah, not everything in life works out fantastic, as you said about your thing yesterday. Like, not everything works out perfect, but it is something that you can give opportunity to. And if somebody's interested in doing something, whether it goes right or wrong at the end, you know, who knows? But that's something you reflect on, you know, you can review it and all the rest of it. So for yourself, Helen, like working like who sort of like, how much sort of umbrella do you have at the moment with like your organization? And like I mean, I guess you must just be very, very busy and hectic from the amount of services that use this now, and the model, and especially like the reviewing tool. Are you kind of as big as the UK, or is it smaller than that?
HFA is international. We have teams in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the rest of North America as well, which is really, really exciting. But we all operate independently, but use the same body of work and materials. The thing that what we've noticed though is as budgets get tighter and tighter, that it's really important to have a variety of ways that people can learn about different ways of working. So we've been looking a lot at e-learning and membership sites with films, and trying to have a variety of different affordable ways for people and organisations to learn. So I think things like that have shifted quite a bit from when we started 18 years ago, where when we would typically do a sort of 4-day training course in essential lifestyle planning. We certainly don't do that anymore. And I think there's we have a Facebook group where we're sharing learning and information too. So as social media has really expanded, as training's changed, we've also been looking at different ways of sharing what we're doing and trying and supporting people to work differently.
Yeah, interesting. Now you mentioned about obviously everyone is feeling with the finances at the moment, but is that something that you see being an issue going forward, or is this something that's just what it is and there's no way around it? You kind of use the best you have available. How much of an issue is it financially with the cutbacks and stuff?
I think very often in times of economic crisis, it's things like training budgets and training teams that disappear, and we have seen some of that, or training just reduced to mandatory training. But it also creates opportunities to think about things differently. So in times of relatively more money than there is at the moment, what we might have done is talk to organisations like yourself about putting managers and staff on a 3 or 4 day training around person-centred thinking or person-centred reviews. Right. But because things have changed, we thought very differently about it. So now what we'd more likely to do is to say, so if you wanted a team of 20 colleagues to, for example, learn about, person-centred thinking skills or person-centred reviews, we'd say, get everybody to do the e-learning first of all, and then if you can afford a day's training, let's have a day's training that's about supporting people to put into practice what they've learned on the e-learning. So it isn't sharing more content, but it's problem solving and helping people put it into practice. Or the other thing that we do is if there was a team leader, we might say, do the e-learning with people, and then we've got a series of what we call Team 15. So it's a small clip of film and some exercises that you can do in a team meeting in just 15 minutes that helps people think about how they can practice what they've learned. So although we will never go back to the times when there was lots and lots of money around for training, but actually by there being less money, it's forced us and other organisations to really think differently about ways to enable people to put things into practice rather than just sending people on training and hoping.
Sure, makes sense. Now, you spoke at the beginning of the show about, and I know this is when people maybe know a small bit about PCP, the one thing they always say is one-page profiles. That's the one thing that's out there. Everybody seems to know about them that I come across. And you said you were talking about earlier, but for you, obviously it's quite a big part of person-centered planning, but with the first page profiles, and again, what's nice about it for me is that we're, there's so much formal stuff in there. There's so much problem solving in all the other folders with risk assessments, support plans, and everything else. It's medication breakdown. It's not always about the person. And what's nice is when I get somebody new coming into the home, maybe they're doing their induction, is to be able to give them and maybe sit with the person looking at their first first page profiles, and it's just a completely different outlook. Whereas somebody might read a folder and be like, after they've come out of it, they'll probably think, blimey, I don't want to go near the person after what I've read. Whereas a first page profile is just so much more transparent, I think is the word I'm looking for, in terms of like really knowing the person and what they're really interested in.